Now these are the measurements you're going to be needing: your shoulder, your bust, waist, half length, nipple point, hips, and blouse length. Now these are mine. I'm going to be working with the measurement of a baby. Now the shoulder is 10. You're going to divide your shoulder by 2, and you're going to add 1 inch for sewing in allowance. Your bust, you divide by 4, which is 22 divided by 4, 5.5. Later on, you're going to add 2 inches for sewing allowance, and that. Same thing with the waist. The waist I have is 20 inches. I'm dividing it by 4, which is 5. I'm also going to add extra 2 inches for sewing allowance later on. My half length is 10. I'll leave it that way. My nipple point 5.5. I'll leave it that way. The hips also 22. I'm going to divide by 4, 5.5. Later on, I'll add 2 inches for sewing allowance. And then the blouse length is 15 inches. I'm going to add 2 inches for folding and the joining at the shoulder area. Now the first thing I like to do is measure out your vertical measurements. Half length, nipple point, and blouse length are measured vertically. Just like this, I make horizontal lines to mark them out because they are necessary when you want to measure your bust, your waist, and your blouse length. You don't have to run about, it's easy. Now measure your shoulder. Mine is 5 inches divided by 2, which is 6. And then at that point, I'm going to go down 1 inch downwards, and then I'm going to draw the slanty line. It's important so that your shoulders stay in place and they don't wobble front and back. To get your armhole, you divide your bust by 4 minus 1, which will give you 4.5. Then you get your armhole guide and you trace out, and make sure that at least you're going a bit inwards so that your armhole does not wobble. If you don't have your armhole guide, you carefully trace out a curve going inwards. It's very important. Going inwards, at least half an inch inwards. To get your neckline, you measure a box 2.5 by 2.5. Then you place your armhole guide and draw out a curve. Very easy. So this is our half length line, and that is where we are going to mark our waist measurement. Now our waist is 20 divided by 4 is 5, which should be about here. Now to get our dart, we're going to divide this 5 by 2, which is going to be just half of the waist. So divide 5 by 2 is 2.5. Right here, this is going to be the center of the dart. Now I'm going to come ½ inch by this side and ½ inch by this side. Now this is our bust point, right? I'm still going to do the same thing for our bust point. Now what I like to do is I like to go 1 inch down from this bust point. Then that is where I'm going to join this straight line this way, and then by the side, and then by the side. So I'm going to take the measurement of this dart. This dart is 3/4. I'm also going to do it here. I measure it downwards here. Now I take this ruler and join, and I also join by the side like this, and also by the side like this. So there you have it. This is your dart. Now remember our measurements that we took earlier: the nipple point, the half length, and the hip. Now this blouse hem, that is where we're going to do our hip measurement. Divide your bust by 4, which is 22 divided by 4 gave me 5.5 plus 2 allowance, 2 inches allowance, and then I gave a dot at the nipple point. I did the same thing for the waist and did the same thing for the hip. All those measurements we calculated earlier plus the sewing allowance, this is where you mark them. When you're done, you join all the points together. At the hem of your blouse, please look carefully at what I did and curve your hem that way. It looks more prettier when you curve the hem of your blouse. For the back piece, I advise you get a wider piece of cloth. From the center point, please move 2 inches inwards. That is for the zip allowance, very important. After making sure you have 2 inches space, place the front of your pattern on the back like so. This will save you time. Now I advise you place the front on top of the back like this, just about 2 inches from this place. This part is for the zip allowance. It's very important, you cannot miss it out. The back is different because of this zip allowance. So what I like to do is, I don't know if you have this is a tracing wheel. If you don't have a tracing wheel, you can get a pen that is no longer writing. You can also use it to trace. What I like to do is, everything that is presently in the front, all these blue outlines, I'm going to trace it. I'm going to apply pressure on it so that it will come out at the back. So I don't need to go over again and start redoing all the processes. I just trace it to the back and it's easy. Don't forget the zip allowance. So I go over it like this. And if you're using the pen that is not writing, you just have to press it down. We're doing it so that the markings can come out at the back. You go over it like this, and we are only going to mark the blue outlines. Remember, the blue outlines are the necessary ones. The outlines on green, they are the guidelines that we use to achieve, the rest of the outfit. Keep tracing it. Anyone can go. You can also use the tracing wheel. Then I also trace this neckline. And that's it. All the markings will come out. And when they do, I don't know if you can see these dots here. When they do, you can go with your marker and just you see, it's easier instead of you doing this. You just follow the outline that has been left for you. And then you already have another piece of the back right here. So what do? You join here. Now something you must note about the front and the back is that the armhole and the neckline is not necessarily the same thing. This is our traced front, right? We trace it onto a back piece that has a zip allowance. The armhole of the back is not necessarily curved in. So what we want to do now is to readjust it. This is our armhole guide, right? Keep it downwards like this. If you don't have an armhole guide, I'll still show you how to do. We bring it out. Now this is the armhole for the back. This one we can no longer use. When you're cutting, please don't cut into this. If you're using a pencil, you can just erase this line. Now how are we going to adjust the front of the neckline? If the neckline also has the same depth with the front, then you can leave it. But mine doesn't have the same depth with the front. So mine is just 1 inch deep. So from this point of the shoulder, I just go down 1 inch, because that's how deep the back part of my neckline is. If your one is not the same thing, then you can adjust it. But okay, I join this line to the zip. I join it here. Now, this is when you're working, work with a pencil so you can erase all the unnecessary things. So now I just put it here like this. Now the useless parts are this one, useless, this line, This one here is also useless. Now I'm going to retrace the important line. Now the necessary line now is this one. That's the one you need for the back. We have to adjust it like this because we traced the front to get the back. But if you don't want, you can still redo it again, and then when it comes to the neckline, you can just make sure that it's 1 inch down, and then make sure you adjust the armhole. So now when you're done, this is how your back should look like. See, this is how your back should look like, and this is how the front should look like. You see, they are different now. So when you're cutting it, you're going to cut just the blue outlines, and when you're putting your zip, the zipper allowance will totally disappear behind this way. So when you place it together, you see it's the same thing with the front. Actually, the only difference is the neckline and the armhole is almost the same thing. So I'm going to cut this one out so that I'll show you how to cut it, so you don't make mistakes, please. I'm going to cut just around this blue line. Please, when you're working, work with a pencil so that you can easily adjust, because that is the essence of pattern drafting. You don't just cut straight away because you're not sure, especially if you've not done it before. You draft patterns so that if there's need for adjustment, you can amend it without being in big soup. As you're cutting it in paper, if you make a mistake, you can correct it. But if you cut it straight to the fabric, you're in serious trouble. And people can say if you cut with pattern, you can no longer cut freehand. Why do you need to cut with freehand? Why should you be cutting with freehand since you have patterns? You cut with freehand if you don't have a choice, or if you have serious mastery of what you're doing. That means you're so sure. But if you're not sure, please stick to pattern. It's better for you. It's better than not making a mistake on somebody's clothes. It's better that way. Don't make mistakes on people's clothes and then you say you're cutting freehand. It's better you stick to the pattern. Once you have gotten it, one is one. You're not looking for quantity, you're looking for quality. So that when you get it, you know that you're good to go. Good to go, good to go, good to go. Okay. Now, this is what it looks like. This dart, you're going to replicate it here when you're joining. This dart, you give it one here. You see, it's on fold. Now, this is what the back looks like. You see? Don't forget to do anything you do on the right side, please do it on the left side. Thank you and thank you and thank you. This is where the back is going to be. It's going to be hidden inside because you're going to put the zip there. This is where it's going to be. You see? It's exactly the same thing. Difference in armhole, difference in neckline, and see you guys next time.